Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and I got my buddy, the great Aram Leighton from Just Baseball with me today. Aram's working on his big top 100 prospect rankings update, and he also is in the AFL. So we've got AFL guys to talk about. We've got tough ranks to talk about. Definitely want to get into Trey Yesavage and the challenges with ranking a guy like that coming off of that historic postseason run. But Aram, first, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing great. It feels weird that we don't have any more Major League Baseball going, but I think even more reason to focus in on the AFL. But no, it's been awesome. I'm excited to break it all down, especially ahead of the top 100 release that we're going to have in the next week. I know you and I were talking before we hit record, but makes it a lot easier for me to maybe answer some of these questions specifically because, well, I'm in the process of ranking some of these guys and figuring out how they stack up right now.
Yeah, I mean, that whole process, like when you've got an update that's about to go live, like you're just doing all those little like last minute tinkering, and it's just I definitely know how that goes. So let's just start at the top. Who's going to be your number one prospect?
Yeah, it's funny because I had McGonigle number one before, but when the last update that we had was in July, and someone had asked in our Discord, because I sent a sneak peek at the top 20 in our Discord, and of course it has Konnor Griffin now at number one, and they're like, oh, well, you were McGonigle over Griffin. What changed? And I was like, let me pull the numbers from the date that we put out the top 100 and what Konnor Griffin did since then. And it was something along the lines of like 350, 450, 540 slash line with like 20% K rate, a trillion stolen bases, 8 homers, and like, mind you, doing that in AA for like half of those games as well. So it just got to a point where, look, I still think even with the performance that Griffin has put together and what he did last year, that McGonigle's bat is the safest in minor league baseball. But now when you're pairing that offensive prowess that we're seeing from Griffin, AA success with the ability to play high level defense, I think potentially at shortstop, the fact that he could steal as many bags as just about anybody, and that there's still more meat on the bone in the power department. I mean, he had a 90th percentile exit velocity of 108 miles per hour last year, and I think he's going to get a little bit more comfortable elevating more consistently. This is a potential superstar if it all works out. So that upside is too much to pass up on at 19 years old. He was 18 years old on opening day last year. Like just a reminder on that front too.
Yeah, I mean, we rarely see guys with these kinds of tools climb levels at that age like he did.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
When it happens, they almost always become superstars.
It's a great point. And like, I hate putting, I almost don't like talking about Konnor Griffin now because I feel like no matter what, you're going to be almost unfair to him because you start comparing him to his predecessors. And to your point, how many 19-year-olds or 18/19-year-olds that are tooled up like this, built like this with this upside, make transitions to from low A, high A, double A the way that they do? The answer is pretty much almost only some of the best players in Major League Baseball, the Bobby Witts of the world and guys like that. So it's just pretty special stuff. The fact that he got better as the season progressed too, for me, was the big thing because he's getting challenged more. He's circled in the lineups as much as you're going to do that in the minor leagues. Like, that's the one guy everyone's aware of. He's going to get pitched to a little bit differently. And it just didn't seem to matter. And then the one little thing that was moderate concern for me in the beginning of the year was just the ability to hit spin. And he was night and day against spin about the second half of the season. So pretty much everything was where you wanted it to be. The makeup's off the charts. It's the kind of guy that you expect to alter your franchise if it all works out.
Yeah, very excited to see what Griffin looks like when he reports to spring training. Very excited to see what kind of noise he makes in camp, especially just given the types of players he's going to be around in Pirates camp. Like, he's going to be more talented than pretty much all the guys he's sharing the clubhouse with. So just kind of seeing how quickly things kind of happen on that front. Now, Kevin McGonigle, I got to give you a ton of credit because, like you said, you were one of the first outlets, I think, that had McGonigle as like a top 5 prospect. And I'm with you. Like, I think just best pure hitter in the minor leagues, that title is clearly Kevin McGonigle's. Obviously my show is kind of more of a fantasy show. And so people want to know, how much power is this guy going to hit for? How many bases is he going to steal? Do you want to talk sort of about how obviously the hit tool is amazing.
Yeah.
You sort of envision the power translating for McGonigle against big league pitching. Assume that's going to happen in the first half of 2026. And then also just the stolen bases, he trended down in that department. He also started the year with an ankle injury. So I don't know how much of that you want to tie to the injury and that type of thing.
I think a good amount. I think there was a big focus for him was just, staying healthy and staying on the field. And I think, I think towards the back end of the season, you started to see him be a lot more effective in the base stealing department. I still think ultimately in that regard is going to be, more of an opportunistic guy. I look at like the end of the season, and if you combine the end of the year in the AFL, he was, I think, 7 for 7 over his final 30 games. I think he can be a guy that can, kind of mix in a handful, maybe 10 to 15 per year. But the thing with the new rules in limiting stolen base, or to limiting, I guess, the ability to cut down stolen bases, so to be able to enhance the stolen base output, is heads up players. I think players with really good instincts can find ways to grab a lot of bags. Look at Juan Soto this past year, and McGonigle's got those instincts. So I could see that being something that ends up becoming a larger part of his game. The power is the thing that I think made me so bullish on him early, and willing to push him up our ranks, on the earlier side there. And I appreciate you, giving the shout out there, because the EVs, he had flashed them, and you had seen just this ability to pull the ball in the air, I think, at an impressive clip, while also still being able to go backside. And there was a few backside homers where I'm like, okay, you got to have legit bat speed to be able to do that. But then you also just see the ability to pull the ball and say, okay, when he's in those advantage counts, he's gonna get his. He's gonna let it eat. I think he should have no problem hitting 20 to 25 home runs when it all comes together at the big league level. And I know Comerica can be a little bit tougher, but the way it's set up there, a little bit better to the pull side for lefties. I do think he can hit plenty of home runs out there. And then, he's going to be, an on-base machine. He's, walking more than he strikes out and all that good stuff. But I do think 20 plus homers is in the tank for him, without a doubt. And I don't know how much it matters for fantasy. I know we've talked about it in the past, though. The positional utility, I'm sure is pretty important. I think he can play shortstop, and I think he should play shortstop for them.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. And to the power point, I mean, he seems like the prototype of a guy who's going to just maximize his raw power in games. And different types of players, but I think back to sort of Jose Ramirez or Francisco Lindor, those types of just hit tool first guys with a compact stroke. But
it's just so quick at the right angles, and they leverage their counts well, and they get the ball out front. And to your point, it works. The other interesting thing too is they've been playing him at third base in the AFL, and like a lot recently. And I feel like you wouldn't do that for no reason, right? Maybe some of it's just to have options, see if he can move around a little bit. But I thought that was interesting. Maybe it's just in case they're out on the Bregman sweepstakes or whatever, again, just to be able to say, hey, we can slide McGonigle over to third, or they go get a shortstop somewhere and that allows them to slide McGonigle to third. I just thought it was interesting because he hasn't really ever played third as far as I know, and he has played third now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of his AFL games, which is a good portion. He's played 15 games.
Yeah, and the Tigers just have this depth chart where they don't have anyone who's just so good, this guy has to play every day at third base or second base, but they have a bunch of guys, like Colt Keith, Max Anderson, How You Lee, those types of guys that are just, you kind of want to just put them at second base where they're not going to do much damage. Colt Keith moving over to third base this past year. Things would fit, I think, so much better for this team if McGonigle can play shortstop.
Oh, yeah.
But I know there are definitely differing opinions out there about just how good his glove would be at shortstop. So you're kind of betting on shortstop long term, or at least like next couple of years?
I think like he's one of those guys where it's kind of roster dependent, right? But like, let's say all things are equal in a neutral setting. I think he's I think he can be a league average shortstop. So a lot of times those guys end up moving in favor of just a better defender because you have somebody come up that can really, really pick it, right? And maybe that ends up adjusting things. I mean, we saw even like a guy like Bryce Terang slide over to second base. Obviously, he's a great defender. But I think when I watch him defend, the arm strength has gotten better. I think he's got enough arm strength there. The instincts, again, are really impressive to me. The internal clock is really good. Like, I just think he's going to do all the little things that will get him by, make all the plays he needs to make. And by the end of the year, he'll grade out, kind of neutrally across the board is what I think at shortstop. And so if you, given their shortstop situation right now, as long as he's not a detriment at short, run with it. And I don't think he will be. I think, again, he's a league average defender. Maybe he finds something in the big leagues and becomes a little bit better, but I do think he's a capable big league shortstop.
So Griffin and McGonigle, if you had to guess, when do you think they're up in 2026?
It's funny because we were talking about this on the show, and you kind of re-sparked that thought in my mind of like Konnor Griffin on a traditional trajectory. Like, you think probably back end of 26, right? He's better than a lot of the guys that they have, and you have a really good pitching staff. And I mean, it sounds crazy, but if they can somehow capture an offense that's like 20th in WRC plus in the league, if Jared Jones comes back at a certain point, Bubba Chandler's doing what he can do, and Paul Skeens is Paul Skeens. Like, this is a team that could actually float around the wild card, or at least be within, reasonable striking distance. The freaking Miami Marlins were not mathematically eliminated until the final week of the season. Like, why couldn't the Pirates do that? A guy like Konnor Griffin could really push and elevate the team. They're not going to spend money. So like, who's the variable that can give you higher upside? It's Griffin. He raked in Double-A. Like, how much pressure could he put on the Pirates with a huge spring training? Because that they're going to love the way he goes about his business, and all the vets on the team are going to love the way he goes about his business for a kid. I think there's a world where he can force their hand, middle of the season. The problem is, similar to the Bubba conversation, I think they're so jaded from Skeens and the fact that they, were so careful with the timing, ended up losing the full year of service, didn't get the PPI anyways, that they may just be hell-bent on preserving, a full year of Konnor Griffin's control there, and then potentially being able to get the PPI. So I weirdly feel like they either are shockingly aggressive, which I skew towards that almost never happening with them, or them being really conservative and it being a late season call up. But here's the interesting kind of tweener situation. He already raked in Double-A. If the plan even was to bring him up late in the year where he doesn't exceed rookie limits, what do you do when he's gotten 1,000 OPS in Double-A? You bump him up to triple and he's got a 900 OPS. Maybe that doesn't happen, but what do you do at that point? You're going to have people sounding the alarms like they were for Bubba Chandler times 200. And the last thing the Pirates need is another optics nightmare. So that might put them in a tough spot where I say I'd almost rather rush him than have the public pressure of bringing him up in an in-between time where now you don't get the benefits of the PPI and you lose the year of service. So I don't know. I'm really interested in it, but I skew, if I had to guess, they're going to try to push this thing late into the season.
Oh, man, I hate your guess, and it would just be, I think it would just be a complete disaster for them to do that. Because he would rake, he would absolutely rake in the minors. I feel like there's got to be like a long-term deal that both sides can agree upon this spring. Like, if
that would change a lot as well. Yeah,
because it's like there's got to be a number that would work for both sides, and you can still make a run at this year's PPI pick. You got Griffin and Chandler, who are both going to be eligible for that. So, gosh, man, it would be the buzzkill of all buzzkills if Konnor Griffin spends 4 months in the minors. But it's the Pirates. We can't rule it out.
That's the thing. And any other team, I'd be looking at the timeline. I'd say, I think we we can see him up in June. Like that's what makes the most sense to me. I don't know how they're going to handle this. And it might be one where you make the decision in good faith of like, hey, he's just hitting his way up. And we're going to promote him because we don't want to upset him. And this will help us work out a long-term extension with him maybe. And maybe that's the way to do it. But in terms of pure timeline, like, and just what I think as a player, I think he doesn't need much more. As crazy as it sounds, like, I think you see him go back to AA, maintain what he was doing, give him a bump to triple. And if he's doing that for, a few weeks, I don't see why on June 1st, you can't say this guy's ready to come up to the big leagues. And at that point, like, he still could probably win Rookie of the Year.
Right. Like, it would be, yeah, I mean, he would. That's the thing is, like, if everyone knew he was going to be on the opening day roster, wouldn't he be like a top 3 favorite for NL Rookie of the Year? Like, so what are we doing here? And like, if you just, like you were saying, like, just on a, let's bring him up when he's exactly ready. That's probably like late May, early June, but the incentive structures just wouldn't make any sense for a player of that caliber debuting in those month ranges. So
no. And that's why it's like, okay, then do you egregiously push it back to compensate, or do you rush him and quote unquote rush him? And I would quote unquote rush him if it were up to me, if he has a strong spring training.
And what about McGonigle?
He's even more clear cut for me, where it's like, I know Scott Harris is conservative, but he's playing out in the AFL now too. So you have a lot of just sample size now. Him playing a long season, and I know he was hurt a little bit, but a long season of just destroying baseballs. Now we got a 109 game sample of an OPS north of 1,000 and a 16% walk rate and a 12% K rate. The defense is the interesting thing, because I think now they're saying, can he play some third too? I think if he shows the versatility as well, where it's like, okay, we actually feel okay with him at third. Why wouldn't McGonigle be up there? I think as soon as, like, I don't know. I don't know why he wouldn't be a break camp candidate as well, because I think if a guy like Cam Smith, and I understand he's a college bat, can be fast tracked like that. And I know he had his ups and downs, but he was still, a net positive for the Astros. Like, you'll get some of these other guys that have been able to kind of fly through and have some success. I think it's semi been reserved for college bats, but like McGonigle at 21 years old now he's just better than these college bats were. I feel like they probably start him in double/triple, depending on how the camp goes, and go from there. But he's a guy that I could still see getting a nod before the cutoff date. But it's another player that I think with a strong camp, I don't see why you don't just kind of throw him up to the big leagues here. I just don't know what else he really needs to show. It just clearly seems like double A ball's too easy for him. So what, you start him in triple? I know it's not a huge sample of double, but it was too easy for him. The AFL's been too easy for him. I think you're kind of wasting time if he's playing anywhere else.
Yeah, and every win is going to count for the Tigers too. So I think breaking camp with your best team would make sense to me in that case.
And he'd be probably, I mean, with how high the floor is, such an easy favorite to win Rookie of the Year.
Oh yeah.
That's the other part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the clear top 2, I think, on most lists.
Yeah.
Let's go to the pitchers. I think at the end of the regular season, to me, I thought Nolan McLean was the number 1 pitching prospect, and I thought he earned that. Digging more into just Bubba Chandler's run in the big leagues, like, I think he's kind of like the 1B to McLean's like 1A at the end of the regular season. But then entered Trey Yesavage, and his historic postseason run. I think he threw more innings in the postseason than in the regular season. Kind of not a pitcher, but brings me back to 2020 Randy Arozarena with the Rays, where he entered that next year rookie eligible, despite being, I think he hit like 10 homers that postseason. Like, Yesavage shuts down the Dodgers in the World Series, and now we still got to rank this guy on prospect lists. So can you kind of talk about the challenge of, the recency bias with what Yesavage did, balancing with what a guy like McLean did over a much larger sample, a guy like Bubba Chandler, who obviously entered the year well above those guys, and just kind of taking a step back and trying to weigh it all in a fair manner.
It's got to be one of the hardest things to do. And it's sometimes where I feel like the prospect list can be a little bit silly, because it's like, okay, we're comparing sometimes like a guy that pitched in the World Series to let's say an 18-year-old shortstop as well, and like who's more valuable. And I think people will say, well, Trey did it in the World Series, that's got to matter, right? And yeah, for sure, but Nolan McLean may have done that in the World Series if he had the opportunity to as well. And we're not ranking players who were the most impressive. We're ranking players that we think are going to be the best long term. So that's the difficult part, is like, how much value do you place into an opportunity that a player seized very well, but that other players didn't have? And Nolan McLean was so good. And I think he would have done a lot of the same. Like it was very clear that if the Mets made the playoffs, McLean was probably their best guy. So, and would he have done the same things? I don't know. His last outing, he gave up 5 runs, whatever, but he struck out 11. You look at the 8 big league starts from Nolan McLean, it's a 206 with a 30% strikeout rate. You look at the 9 appearances, including the playoffs, from Trey Yesavage, it's a 3.46 ERA. Of course, higher stakes, had to face the Dodgers multiple times, all that good stuff. I think you have to just really go back to, especially with pitchers, makes it a little bit easier, the stuff. And how do you think the stuff's going to play? And how do you think the pitchability is going to play? But that's where it also becomes difficult, because Trey Yesavage is also very unique. There's not a lot of pitch plots that look like his. But ultimately for me, when I look at what Nolan McLean did in AAA, what he did in the big leagues, and then you look at the different ways that he can get hitters out. Like, I think for Yesavage, big part of it's going to be the strikeout. And he's clearly going to be able to punch a lot of guys out. And he has actually turned into a pretty good ground ball artist as well, since he got up to the big leagues. But McLean at a 60% ground ball rate, the command is incredible. You think about the narratives as well. McLean reminds me a little bit of the path of Spencer Schwellenbach, where two-way player in college, barely pitched, TJ, then gets to pro ball, like finally is pitching then really for like a little bit more extended innings, then really sees things click. Stuff continues to tick up. Command really ticks up, and you have this like complete pitcher. Is he as pinpoint as Schwellenbach? No, but the stuff is even more insane. And the number one thing that I think separates McLean for me is I think his release is also unique in a different way. These guys are like 2 feet apart in release height, but McLean, you have a really unique pair of fastballs, and between all minor league levels, and actually no, if you just go AA, AAA, opponents had a 168 batting average. AAA and the bigs. They had like a 170 batting average with a 550 OPS against his fastballs. So if he has that to go with the sweeper that I thought, was unlucky in the big leagues, the curveball, the splitter, the cutter, I just think he has the entire recipe to be, the floor is so high, but the ceiling is still so high as well. And that's why even with the postseason performance, I think McLean is that guy. I think is the number one guy. But that said, I think what the postseason provided for us with Yesavage was just more opportunity to see him pitch in the bigs. And I think that's still the most important part. Like, I don't think you can say a World Series start is worth 4, regular season big league starts. And I think that's how some people inadvertently, value it. It was a really good big league start. But we also, and with, higher stakes. So you can probably point towards the makeup and the ability to handle the moment, all those things. And sure, those are like, I think the intangibles that can push a guy up. But I think it was just really the opportunity to see how unique he is and how hitters were not able to adjust, how that slider is like just bizarre in the best way possible. And how he's just, I think it raised the floor higher as a guy that can be a really good middle rotation arm.
Yeah, McLean, just the amount of tools in his toolbox, it's just really insane for a prospect eligible pitcher. Like he's got a bevy of really good pitches to throw at lefties, a bevy to throw at righties. He's, like you said, the ground ball rate is up there with like the leaders, and he was a two-way player like 3 years ago. So it kind of makes sense, and he was better in the big leagues than he was at AAA. Probably some big league coaching involved in that. But yeah, I mean, McLean, he's kind of got about as airtight of a resume as you can have as a pitching prospect, because he's had like 48 innings. And so we just got to see about as much of him as we could. Yesavage, that release point height, it's just like, and you can see it on video. It's just, you can imagine how difficult those and uncomfortable those at bats are. So I mean, we're really talking about some just blue chip pitching prospects here. It's tough having to put one ahead of the other. Is Bubba 3 for you then?
Yeah, but Bubba checks in at 3, and I think he did a really good job over the final 3 outings of his big league debut last year, and I think there's a lot to like there. I just think he's a little bit more one-dimensional than these guys, where like it's going to be 60% heater, right, or 55% heater, and it's a good thing it's a really good heater. It's a 70 heater, but guys can I think if you're not on, guys can prepare for that a little bit more easily. Like we saw, the Dodgers just didn't really know what to do with Yesavage, because he has a slider and the splitter both working kind of similarly but different enough. And then that fastball that, we talk about just the release and how the 3 pitches tunnel off of each other. It's like he's dropping it out of the sky. So I think it's just a really unique arsenal that just gives him more wiggle room. But at the same time, Bubba Chandler could emerge next year and say, and this is the hard part about pitching prospects, he could emerge next year with a curveball that he has way more confidence in. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now he's got another offering. And he might have a little bit more confidence with the cutter. And then now it's not so fastball changeup heavy. But I think at this present moment, yeah, I lean towards the other 2, because I think the floor is a little bit higher. And I don't think you're giving up much on the ceiling side either.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly how I have it, or how I will have it on my next update. Now, after those 3, where like we're gonna get back to talking hitters here in a second, but I'm just curious, like, where do you go for your number 4 pitching prospect? Like personally, I've got 3 more guys who pitched in the big leagues, the Tolley early with the Red Sox and Tong with the Mets. But obviously there's some guys with lights out stuff that are a little less proven in the upper levels. Where do you go at number 4 for your pitching prospects?
Yeah, this was a hard part, and it's a part that I'm afraid I could like change at some point in the next few days. But the more I've watched of Thomas White, the more I get excited about his upside, and it just starts to remind me a little bit of like the early stages, like Blake Snell. The problem though with White is he just walks way too many guys, right? We had like a 14% walk rate. The command can just be so spotty, but I mean, when he is on, he's darn near unhittable. And reminder, he was 20 years old for the entirety of the season. So at this present moment, I think the upside of Thomas White is just so tantalizing for me that I've got him in that spot. You've got still, I think, Andrew Painter, who's become almost underrated now after the year. I think we're too quickly moving off of a guy that, look, it was not just the TJ, it was multiple years off because of trying to avoid the TJ and then getting the TJ. And it's not like he was, for a lot of guys, it's kind of relearning your body and learning how to throw again. And I think for the vets, it's a little bit easier because you're just so used to it and you know how your body works and everything. And Painter, like, he just hasn't thrown that much, period. So I think for him, it's just a little bit of a different process. So I think he's another strong candidate right there. And then, then I have Tong and Early right there as well. It's just such impressive arms with what they did last year. But that's the other difficult part where you're comparing like guys that haven't debuted that have. But at this present moment, I lean towards just the upside of White, who, just pitch by pitch here. I've got his 3+ pitches from him and then an above average 4th. So there's just not a lot of, I don't know if anybody else has that caliber of stuff that is, of that group.
Yeah. White is a big time favorite of scouts who come on this show. So not surprised to hear you go in that direction. Now 2025 draft class, you're going to be ranking these guys on this update. To me, it's a very muddled class, like at least for fantasy, because there's like 11 or 12 guys that I really like. but I have a hard time saying like, this is the guy I really want of these like 11 or 12 guys, which I'm sure is frustrating for the readers who have to make the decision in their FIPD drafts. But where do you kind of see as like the top 2 or 3 guys from this draft class that you're really going to push up your ranks?
Honestly, the more I watch so of course, Cade Anderson is I think the easy low hanging fruit, just because he's going to fly through the minor leagues. He's in a perfect organization. It's a great spot for him, right? And on top of that, it's just worst case scenario, this guy's eating innings for you, I think, in the back of the rotation. But I think more likely it's going to be better than that. But with when I was looking at Holiday and Willits, it becomes a really fascinating conversation. I don't want to. This is another fun challenge of how much value do you put in a very brief pro debut? The answer should be not that much, but how much value do you put in amateur
right
looks either? Like should a 20 game pro sample supersede Ethan Holiday just destroying the average 17-year-old kid on the baseball field? Maybe it can, I think, encourage a recalibration, but he could also make changes so quickly. I think for me, it was just more about Willits. I love the glove. I was so impressed with the way that he defends at shortstop at 17 years old. The ability to move over there, the arm strength is good. You could just tell his dad played in the bigs and could pick it as well. And then the bat to ball is good. I mean, it's bottom of the barrel power right now for Eli Willits, but he has plenty of room to get stronger. He can run. It's a switch hitter. The approach is good. The bat to ball is good. That's a guy that if I have to just wait on him to get more impact, I think I can bet on that as a 17-year-old. So for me, I feel like Willits is the guy that's kind of moving up for me the more I watch. And of course, it's kind of chalk because he's the number 1 pick, but it kind of isn't chalk at the same time, given I think the way things shook out and the way people look at this draft. But I do go Willits over Holiday at this point, just because of the probability of sticking it short. I think just some of the advanced nature of his game, the way that he can run. But in terms of maybe some other guys that I'm excited about that maybe aren't as popular from this class, it becomes an interesting conversation because I think this class is going to go down as one of the weaker as we look back at like in a year or two. And I'd say probably I'm going to save it for most difficult players to rank. There's one guy from this class that is, I think, one of the more difficult players to rank for me. But I feel like for me, I think I'm kind of erring on the side of less of the guys from this draft class being in the top 100 before the season starts. And maybe that'll change. But that's just how it feels right now. Like I think the top guys like Seth Hernandez, all those guys, like those are all, I think, clearly going to be top 100 prospects. Joseph Parker, all those types of guys. But I don't know. I think my cutoff even is a little bit earlier than some others because I don't know. I just don't love this class overall.
Yeah, my approach from like a ranking standpoint is I don't have a single guy from this class currently in my top 50, but then I've got like about a dozen of them kind of in that like 50 to 75 range. And it's more, for fantasy, a big part of it is like we can dream on these guys because there isn't a sample size or there's a very small sample size, whereas the guys from prior draft class, we can kind of rule out the very high end outcomes for them. So, these teenage shortstops, the college pitchers, like I think there's a case for them to all be sort of in that like 50 to 75 to 80 range. But I didn't think anyone from this class deserved to be like a top 50 fantasy prospect heading into 2026. Now let's get to the tough ranks outside of a guy like Yesavage. Who's maybe a guy that is moving around your sheet? You're having a hard time kind of pinning down exactly where to put him. Anyone jump out to you?
It's Liam Doyle. It's funny. Like, we're talking about this past draft. Like, I've seen people really high on Doyle. And I get it, right? We've got a lefty who averaged 96 on the fastball last year. But I don't know. Like 2024, he averaged 92, 93 on the fastball. and had good characteristics and it played pretty well. But it's very fastball dependent, right? So it's a 64% fastball usage. And when it's upper 90s, yeah, that's going to play. But it's a huge leap velocity wise. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of like what we saw from Quinn Matthews just a year earlier. And then like, do guys hold it or does their arm not necessarily hold up as much? I don't know. The other thing is he doesn't really have a secondary I love. Like the splitter has looked all right. The slider is not great. And then he's mixed in a curveball. What are the secondary offerings that are going to kind of take that next step? Like I think he clearly struggles to spin it at a really high clip. So if it's a velo dependent, fastball heavy approach here, okay, one, you got to hope that he's holding that upper 90s velo going into this coming season. Two, you still, even if he is holding it, need to hope that he finds a secondary pitch that he can throw more than 13% of the time with confidence. And then three, he probably needs another one. So I don't know. I think I see the arm talent, obviously, and the ability. I think there's a lot more working against him than people think. But at the same time, I don't want to bet against a lefty who can throw 100. So he's a difficult player for me to rank. And I think people would like call me nuts if I left him off the top 100 entirely, but he's not far off from slipping off for me. And I don't know. I think I'm almost letting that influence me because I don't know. It's there's a lot of other players I think I'm just taking right now.
I don't know if it makes you feel any better, but I couldn't agree more with you on Doyle. I've got him at like 91 and I've got him behind, I think 6 pitchers from that class. Like I've got him behind Anderson, Arnold, Hernandez, Bremer, Witherspoon, and even Gage Wood. But I'm with you. It's like it's scary to rank a lefty who has that caliber of fastball, who I think the Cardinals are probably going to push pretty aggressively if his arm holds up. It's scary to put a guy like that too low, but just kind of going into the draft, I liked him the least of those sort of high-end college starters, just more due to the arsenal, like you talk about, and the reliance on the fastball. And so, yeah, he's someone that I kind of snuck into the top 100. Certainly not a guy I'm going to end up with in any FYPDs, but I was way too low on a guy like Garrett Crochet back in the day, and like that's obviously turned out the way it has. But yeah, I mean, I'm right with you. I think he's a very tough rank.
Yeah. And I mean, I saw him, and I don't want to take too much of like a short sample, but just even seeing him in his pro debut, it just, I don't know. It seemed like an at bat that you could game plan for a little bit more comfortably. And, if you're ready for velocity, you got a decent shot, but who knows? Like he could find some things first, off season, kind of working with the pro team, spring training, all that good stuff. And maybe he finds a cutter, maybe there's some other offerings that work for him and make a difference. But I see leverage reliever more so than anything else. It could be a really good, arm for them, but I think he's got a lot more reliever risk than he gets credit for, probably.
Yeah, definitely. Who else is a tough rank for you as we're about a week away from you debuting this top 100?
Arjun Nimmala is tough because I love the player he can be. And he's shown the ability to make some adjustments that have, I think, preceded good results. But at the same time, like, I think we need to see a little bit more now. I know he's been young and like he was 19 years old for the entirety of last season, but he finished the year final 50 games, 595 OPS. He can defend it short. That raises the floor, but it just hasn't all really come together for him yet. I don't want to I don't want to sound the alarms as he enters his age 20 season. He'll be 20 for the entirety of the year, but it was a rough finish. And, I just think it's been kind of turbulent for him. And he's a player that's probably ultimately going to be a little bit more power over hit. So how much power are we going to get out of that like 6 foot 190 frame? Defense is good It may need to be great. Can it be great there? Or how much of an impact are the legs going to be in the game? So like, I'm interested in just kind of the overall outlook there, but it's just a difficult player to completely wrap my head around. I think Ethan Salas is obviously difficult for anybody, but from like a non-fantasy perspective, the defense is so good. It raises the floor so high behind the dish. So like that keeps him, in that conversation for me. Justin Crawford, like there gets to a point where like you can't deny the numbers, and the numbers have been so damn good for Justin Crawford. But again, another year of a 60% ground ball rate and a swing that's pretty long, and an average launch angle on hard hit baseball is 3 degrees. So, but who am I to keep saying now 330 and 850 plus OPS? Like, nah, this guy's not going to make it work. I did say that to a degree with Christian Campbell, and I think to a degree there's swing inefficiencies that have affected him for sure, but it's a little different with Crawford because he can play center field. He can run a little bit better. The bat's a ball is better. But I can venture to say he'll be the only hitter in the history of Just Baseball's top 100 list on the top 100 with a ground ball rate north of 60%. So that's just another player it's a 45% hard hit rate, but everything's in the ground. He did finish the year cutting down on that ground ball rate some, and that's something that gives me a little bit of optimism, but that he has always been a player that breaks my brain. I have no idea how he's consistently as productive as he is.
Yeah. I want to talk about Crawford and Nimmala. We don't really have to talk about Salas. As you said, he's the as polar real life over fantasy as you can get. Crawford, I have this, I call guys when the ground ball rate and the opposite field rate add up to 95 or better, I call them 95 percenters, and Crawford's almost a 105 percenter because his ground ball, not only is the ground ball rate just obscenely high, but he's always hitting over 41% of balls to the opposite field too. So, it's just not a guy that I necessarily am that interested in. But he was also the youngest qualified hitter at AAA, which has to be mentioned. The Phillies, they kind of threw him in the deep end, and I didn't like him coming into the year, but I mean, he did probably exceed my expectations with what he did at AAA, just from a production standpoint. But the batted ball profile, I just hate it. Nimmala, he is so tough to rank because, like, couldn't you easily see him just coming into next year and just starting the year on fire, and then it's just like, oh crap, like I lowered him too much. But then it's also like, if he comes out next year and like gets to AA and just the strikeouts just go,
it's not going to get easy
through the roof. Like, then it's just, then you're kind of like, oh, I left him too high. So, I mean, he's like a quintessential tough to rank prospect,
because he's shown the ability to make the adjustment. So it's like, okay, well, maybe he makes that adjustment and it works, and he has this great start to the season. But he had a lot of time. He spent the whole year in high A last year and didn't make an adjustment. So that's where it's like, okay, did he meet his match? It's not going to get easier in double. That's where I could see it really going one way or another really quickly. It's really difficult. And then with Crawford too, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, what I'm using against him, which is the ground ball rate, can maybe also work in his favor. Cause it's like, okay, well, imagine if he does elevate a little bit more. Like, imagine if he finds a way to pull the ball in the air a little bit more. Like, how much more meat is there on the bone there? Because the contact rates are good, right? It's 89% in zone. He does a good job of spoiling pitches outside of the zone. So if he's able to find a little bit more there, like, what does that look like? So I think it just got to the point now for me where I was a guy that consistently didn't even have him on the top 100, where the production, the proximity, the defense and speed, he's probably a guy that still needs to be in there. And the way that he finished the year helped, I think, even just cutting that ground ball rate to like 53%, 54% over his final 30 games, that helped him hit 350 with a 929 OPS, and he hit 4 home runs in that span. So maybe something clicked there.
Yeah, that's good to point out. I mean, if he takes a step forward in 2026, I'm sure there's going to be lots of, because I still don't have him in my top 100, but I don't factor in defense as much as you do. But like, there's definitely going to be some victory laps from the Justin Crawford stands if he's able to kind of take another step next year. Aram, let's talk about the AFL. Who caught your eye out there that besides Kevin McGonigle?
Yeah, I mean, there's some obvious, like, I think some obvious guys where McLean Valdez, I think, to anybody, like, how can he not catch your eye with what he's been able to do? And there's just a couple home run swings that were just nuts to me. But Max Anderson with the Tigers, he's hitting 488. But what was so impressive to me, and I don't know if there's a ton of tools, outside of just the bat, but the bat to ball is impressive, honestly. More impressive than I thought. Like, he's not going to be a plus hit guy, but the barrel lives in the zone forever. And I think it gives him a wide range of being able to catch velocity deep if he's a little tardy, while also staying in the zone on, softer stuff if he's a little bit early. And that's why he was able to keep that strikeout rate pretty low this season, despite, the contact rates being roughly average. And then just how hard he hits the ball to all fields. He recognizes spin so well. Like, this is another player that I think is going to hit his way into the conversation here for, I think the Tigers in the next year. I'm trying to think specifically of, like, in person. Charlie Pagliarini, just relative to what I was expecting going in. Yeah, the Mariners prospect. Pagliarini is a guy that had always had the EVs, but I just didn't really see enough coming together there offensively. You started to see a little bit more in this fall league where not swinging and missing as much, and then flashing. Like, I think in the same game I watched him pop a 109 and a 111 or something like that. He had an EV 90 of 109 miles per hour this year. So he's on the older side. They're playing him a little bit in left, some second base, but he's hitting the living crap out of the ball, and he's gotten more patient. And that could just be an interesting kind of under the radar type of guy there. And then Nick Morabito off, just in terms of, for the Mets, the tools there. Like, I knew Morabito could play solid center. We knew he was going to draw his walks and kind of just be a pesky kind of throwback type of player. Could be a fourth outfielder. And I still think that's the outlook here. But I watched him rip a throw from the outfield at like 92, 93 miles per hour. So I'm turning run times. I think he has the fastest run time right now so far in the AFL, like in terms of feet per second at like 31.2 or something like that. Like, it was all the things that I knew were key parts of his game were just turned up a little bit higher than I expected. So just seeing him just a little bit more toolsy than I expected, I think was interesting. And then Josh Adamshevsky from the Brewers. I know a lot of people love him, and understandably so. He was just hurt. It was just a year that kind of got away from him. He's just a pure hitter, man. And there's more power in there, and he's just a really well-rounded bat. I think just getting a chance to see that, live and in person was cool. And I think he's a big-time breakout guy potentially for next year. And they're playing him more in left, and I'm interested to see, like, he looked okay out there. It's really hard to gauge guys' defensive ability in the outfield in Arizona because no one can see the ball. But if he's able to play a serviceable left as well, I think he could be a really well-rounded player here that I think is just starting to tap into the power that he has.
Yeah, Adamshevsky does not miss upper body day in the gym. He is absolutely ripped. I want to get back to McLean Valdez because I haven't talked about him yet on the show since his AFL exploits. The power was obvious, heading into the AFL. But, when guys like, he's on route probably to top 3 finish in AFL MVP. Like, a lot of times we see guys, turn that into just a big time, like, kind of career turning point. but sometimes it ends up just not really mattering. Like, is he a guy that's in your top 100 mix now? Is he someone that you think is a future everyday player?
He's definitely in the mix, and this is another one of those where you don't want to overvalue an AFL, performance. But I think his AFL performance is more just validating the breakout that he had this year in the regular season, because it wasn't just a breakout. It was that multi-level type of breakout where I think people look at the cumulative AA numbers and say, oh yeah, he came down to earth a little bit there. He really just had a slow start to AA and then really sprinted through the finish line there and looked really, really good. Now over the final like 40 games or so in double, where I think he had like an 860 OPS if you include the postseason over his final 40 games at AA. And then you pair that. I mean, we're talking 295, 390, 470 slash line with a 23.7% strikeout rate. You pair that then with what he's doing in the AFL. And it was more just some of the individual swings. There was a backup slider or cutter slider, like 90 miles per hour. I remember that was in on his hands and he crushes it and puts it off the foul pole. And then Valdez gets, I think a softer breaking ball away and he just golfs it out. And I'm just like, man, he's got different swings. Like he's got different clubs in that bag. And that was something I don't think we really saw from him before. You have an EV 90 108. You have the ability to pull the ball in the air at a really high clip, a 37% ground ball rate this past season. The swing decisions are good and continue to get better. There's obviously a lot of pressure on the bat, but all of a sudden the bat looks like it can handle. We have 35 homers, 143 games here, and all the underlying data points towards it being, legitimate. And then you watch and it looks legitimate. It's a very simple operation. I think he is worthy of top 100 consideration. And it's not like he's a 23-year-old that's putting it all together and his second taste of AA. It's a 21-year-old who's putting it all together in what was his first taste of high A and AA. I think that says a lot.
Yeah, the Pirates, we talked about how little talent they have, especially, obviously on the position player side. Like they actually have one of the deepest rotations in the majors. Like they go 10 deep with guys that I think are like viable big league rotation options for 2026. But just that drop off from, like, if Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz are your two best position players by a wide margin, that's not good. But
yeah,
like the drop off from those guys, I mean, you get to replacement level guys real quick. So Valdez is definitely in the right org to get a fair shake to see if that bat first profile will play.
Yep. And I mean, if you're going to bet on a bat first profile, bet on the high exit velocity, high, air percentage,
right,
good swing decisions, like that all, and pulls. Like that's all going to usually point towards, at the very least, a guy that could be a short platoon, kind of power bat and carve out his kind of groove and work from there. And then, sorry, one other in the AFL on the pitching side, the obvious, but like it was just to see it in person, just see him back. Luis Perales, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That fastball is crazy. He's all the way back. He's one of the, I think by midseason, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. I really do think that, especially in that organization now with the way that they're developing their arms, and the quality of stuff is just all the way back. And he was in the midst of becoming that anyways before he got hurt. So just to see him back to that, I think is really exciting. I think the Red Sox have I think one of the bigger risers. And then Anderson Brito was so good for the Astros. He was so good when I saw him. He's got 22 punch outs in like 11 and a third. The velocity, he had a little bit of a shoulder issue. I don't know if they ever really said what he was dealing with, but I think it was relatively minor and they were being conservative because, Brito's not throwing a ton professionally, but that velo is all the way back. Like he's sitting 98 out there. The slider is disgusting. Like this big sweeper. And then he's got a power curveball as well. Like there's really fascinating stuff here from Brito, who at 21 years old is the highest upside of, I think, any pitching prospect in that Astro system by a good margin.
Yeah, Brito and Perales both, undersized. And Brito, I think going into the AFL, had decent amount of bullpen risk for me just based on the amount of innings he's been able to log. But that's great to see him healthy and finishing the year strong. And yeah, Perales, I put Perales top like 75 just based off of like the 5 innings he threw when he came back.
You can do it way more in the AFL with pitchers. Just look at the stuff, look at what he's doing, and the stuff's the stuff. And when it looks like that, yeah, you can throw him in the top 75, and I don't think there's any question about it.
Anyone else you want to talk about, Arm, before we sign off? This has been great, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to think specifically, because I'm excited to put the list out and see what everybody thinks. Of course, one player that I want to get your temperature on is because I think he's rising and is going to continue to rise. Ryan Waldschmidt. I think from a fantasy perspective, it's interesting too, because Ryan Waldschmidt, he finished the year so incredibly strong, but also the stolen base aspect of his game, I think, is incredibly underrated. The defense was something that I think held him down coming out of the draft, but he never really got a chance to prove that he could play defense because he tore his ACL. So since he's gone pro, he has worked really hard defensively and has looked so much better in a corner that the Diamondbacks actually said, hey, let's try in center. And he was playing center for them in Double-A down the stretch. And look, I don't know if that's where he's going to play long term, but it didn't look bad. So I think just the fact that, like, that's even a remote possibility is crazy compared to where he was before. But also just the way that this guy finished the year, right? We're talking about final 50 games, 316, 441, 508 slashes, a 948 OPS, 16% walk rate, and a 17% K rate. He had 8 homers in that span. And he's going to get bags. Like, that's the other part that I just think is underrated in his game. Final 50 games, he stole 16 bags. If you include the 2 postseason games, which he didn't even grab any bags. So it's really final 48 games. Where do you feel like the fantasy world is on Waldschmidt? Do you think he's underrated? Because I just feel like in general, I think he's a guy that just, it just feels underrated to me.
Yeah, I was pretty high on Waldschmidt, as a nice sleeper coming out of the draft based on the fantasy potential, sort of assuming he was not going to provide much defensive value. And I've got him at like 35 right now. And I find that people are like, I used to be the high guy on Waldschmidt, but now I feel like there's someone in it. Like, I do all these like prospect mock drafts and stuff, and he's always gone, top 30-ish or so.
Okay.
So it's like almost like I got passed, but it's making me question whether
No, that's about right.
Up at 35, I love him. I kind of comped him to like Seiya Suzuki coming into the year as like a ceiling outcome, assuming that he was going to just be sort of a left field DH. But yeah, I mean, the speed
now
is
you have
the profile.
A guy that can maybe play all 3, but definitely play a good corner. But that's funny. No, I didn't realize he's already that highly regarded. So it sounds like that's a pretty good spot for him. The other one's Robby Snelling too.
Yeah, he's so hard.
But I think at this point, with where he's at, the fastball is so good. And that was a pitch that was like kind of viewed as the liability, right? It's kind of low 90s. Is he going to be able to miss a lot of bats with that? He missed a lot of bats because he ticked up to mid 90s, touching upper 90s, and he gained 1.5 inches of vert on his fastball with the AAA ball, which is unheard of. And opponents at 165 against his fastball. I think Robby Snelling should be regarded as one of the best left-handed pitching prospects in baseball, and he's still not. The athleticism's off the charts. He's still just 21. He's already shown that he can get more vert with the AAA ball, which never happens. The curveball is back and great for him. The changeup is good. He's got this bridge slider as well. But the big thing is the fastball, right? Where that pitch was getting crushed in the past and had a 523 OPS against this past year with an in-zone whiff rate of 27% and a strike rate of 72%. I think he's a monster between the floor and now the ceiling that I don't think Snelling gets enough love just yet.
Yeah, I was really kind of surprised that he didn't get rewarded with like a few starts in the big leagues to close the year. I mean, the Marlins do seemingly always seem to have enough pitching. But still, I just really wanted to see how big league hitters would handle his stuff. But after his org mate, Thomas White, like I think Snelling is. I mean, how do you compare Snelling to like Cade Anderson? Because I have Snelling as my second ranked lefty who hasn't debuted behind Thomas White. But Anderson would be that next guy in that sort of top three of lefties who haven't debuted yet. So how do you view Snelling versus Cade Anderson?
That's the thing. So before, I had Cade Anderson ahead, and just the more that I'm doing this and the more that I'm looking at what Snelling did last year, it's like, how do you not have Snelling ahead? Because I don't know, they're pretty similar in age. We're looking at about like 7 months apart, and one dominated in AAA and the other dominated in the SEC. So and not to take anything away from Cade, but like final 14 starts of the season for Robby Snelling, 1.21 ERA, 33% K rate and a 6% walk rate. And they're kind of similar archetypes of like the strike thrower with a little bit better stuff than you'd expect. But now the stuff is a lot better. I feel like I'm going to have to bump Snelling ahead of Cade Anderson.
Yeah, man. I totally get it. And, the fantasy crowd is in on Snelling just without even him pitching in the big leagues this year. Like I know he's already getting drafted fairly high in redraft leagues based off what he did down the stretch at AAA. So, Snelling and Nimmala to me are probably the two toughest ranks of the guys we talked about. Like I could see a case for putting them both like 20 spots higher than I have them or 20 spots lower than I have them. And, really good stuff, Aram. Why don't you let people know when they can expect these rankings and where to find them?
And we'll have it out sometime early next week. And then you can see that all at justbaseball.com. I'll be doing live Q&As throughout the week on our Discord, kind of talking about the rankings and all that, and answering questions for that as well. And then in addition, of course, a lot of breakdowns of it all on the Call Up podcast. Of course, the Just Baseball show as well for everything going on in the off season. But thank you as always for having me on, man.
Always great to talk with you, man. You're really smart and you're really good on podcasts and you're really on the show. And enjoy the rest of your ranking process here. I know that's
I'm
always
gonna try.
I'm
gonna try.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot, dude. I'll talk to you later.